The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 1, The Awakening. The isolation of Naruto Uzumaki was not a quiet thing. It was a heavy, physical weight that sat on his chest every time he walked through the streets of Konoha. While other children were taught the basics of leaf concentration by their parents, Naruto was left to his own devices in a cramped apartment, eating expired ramen and wondering why the milk in his fridge was often sour. The discovery happened when he was 6 years old. It was a rainy Tuesday. Naruto had been chased into a dead-end alley by a group of genin who thought it was good practice to pelt the village outcast with blunt practice shuriken. One of the projectiles caught him sharply on the bridge of his nose. He fell back against the cold stone wall, blood streaming down his face. He felt that familiar heat behind his eyes, the hot, bubbling anger he always tried to suppress. But this time, the anger didn't just stay in his head. As he wiped the blood from his eyes, he noticed something impossible. The blood on his sleeve wasn't soaking into the fabric. It was beating up, vibrating with a low hum that he could feel in his teeth. "What the?" he whispered. He reached out a shaking finger to touch a droplet. As the skin made contact, the blood didn't smear. It sharpened. It turned into a tiny, microscopic needle that pricked his fingertip. Naruto gasped, pulling back, but he noticed that he could feel the droplet. It was like an extension of his own nervous system. The secret library of the self. For the next year, Naruto became a ghost. He stopped pulling pranks. He stopped shouting for attention. He spent every waking hour after the academy in the deepest, most overgrown parts of the training grounds. He learned that his body was different. Most shinobi use chakra to affect the world around them: fire, water, earth. Naruto realized he could use his chakra to affect the world within him. He started small. He would sit by a stream, cut a small nick in his palm with a kunai, and focus. At first, he could only make the blood crawl like an insect across his skin. But by the age of 8, he could make it jump. One afternoon, he discovered this surface tension technique. By flooding the blood on his skin with high-density chakra, he could make a thin layer of liquid as hard as a steel shield. He tested it by punching a tree. Usually, his knuckles would bruise and bleed. This time, the blood formed a crimson glove a split second before impact. The bark of the tree shattered. His hand felt nothing. But there was a price. Every time he used it, he felt a wave of dizziness. "I need more juice," he muttered to himself, clutching his stomach. He didn't know about the 9 tails yet, but he felt a massive, boiling reservoir of energy deep in his gut. He began to try and hook that orange energy into his blood. The academy years, the mask of the loser. By the time Naruto was 10, he was a master of 2 lives. In the academy, he played the dead last. He purposely failed the clone jutsu because his new power made his chakra too thick to create ethereal copies. His chakra wasn't meant to be projected into the air. It was meant to stay in the veins. Iruka-sensei would sigh as Naruto's clones came out as puddles of goo. The class would laugh. Sakura would huff in annoyance, and Sasuke would look away with a HN of disdain. Naruto let them laugh, because at night, under the pale moon, he was practicing something the village hadn't seen in generations. He had moved past simple needles. He was learning internal regulation. He found that by vibrating the blood in his legs, he could move with a burst of speed that rivaled a shunshin body flicker, even without the hand signs. He called it the pulse step. One day, during a sparring match, he was paired against Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba was cocky, egged on by the cheers of the students. "Don't cry when Akamaru and I mess you up, Naruto," Kiba yelled, charging forward with a dynamic entry. Naruto didn't move. He closed his eyes. He felt his heart rate, thump, 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 thump. He channeled a tiny spark of that inner heat into his forearms. Kiba's kick landed squarely on Naruto's arm. But instead of the sound of impact, there was a metallic clink. Kiba recoiled, clutching his shin. Ow! What the hell do you have under your jacket? Armor, Kiba hissed. Just skin, Kiba, Naruto said, giving his trademark goofy grin. But for a split second, his blue eyes flashed a deep, predatory crimson. The night of the Forbidden Scroll. As he pored over the massive scroll in the woods, his eyes landed on a redacted section at the very bottom. A footnote about the Uzumaki vitality and the forbidden rites of the bloodletting. The scroll explained that the Uzumaki clan didn't just have high chakra, they had living blood. When Mizuki arrived and revealed the truth about the Nine Tails, Naruto didn't just collapse in grief. The shock of the revelation caused his seal to leak. The red, corrosive chakra of the fox began to pour into his bloodstream. Usually, this would burn a human from the inside out. But Naruto's body, already trained to manipulate its own blood, didn't reject the fox's power. It assimilated it. Mizuki threw a giant shuriken. Iruka braced himself to jump in front of Naruto. But Naruto didn't need a protector. He stood up, his hair casting a shadow over his eyes. He reached out and caught the spinning, massive blade with his bare hand. The metal groaned and snapped. Naruto's hand was coated in a dark, boiling crimson liquid that hissed as it touched the air. You told me I'm a monster, Naruto said, his voice overlapping with a low, demonic growl. I think it's time I started acting like one. Instead of 1,000 clones, Naruto created only 10. But these weren't normal clones. They were sanguine clones, physical, fleshy constructs made of blood and fox chakra. They didn't poof away when hit, they bled, and that blood turned into traps that ensnared Mizuki's limbs. Iruka watched in horror and awe as Naruto dismantled a Chunin-level traitor without breaking a sweat. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 2, The Skeleton of the Soul. After the battle with Mizuki, Naruto didn't go home. He sat on the head of the fourth Hokage's monument, staring at his hands. The sanguine clones had dissolved back into the earth, but his body felt heavy. It wasn't just his blood that felt restless anymore. There was a dull, aching throb deep inside his joints, a pressure that felt like his very frame was trying to outgrow his skin. He gripped the railing of the monument, and his frustration peaked. Why am I so different? He thought, squeezing the cold metal. Crack. It wasn't the railing that broke. A jagged, ivory spike tore through the skin of Naruto's palm. It was white, polished like marble, and sharper than any kunai. He stared at it, frozen. It wasn't just a bone, it was his bone, and it didn't hurt. The wound didn't even bleed because the blood around the exit point had instantly coagulated into a perfect crimson seal. Blood and bone. A voice rumbled in the back of his mind. It was the first time he truly heard the fox, not as a roar, but as a low, amused vibration. The Uzumaki provided the life, but the jailer provides the strength. You're becoming a cage that can walk, little boy. The secret training, hardness and flow. Over the next few weeks, before the team assignments, Naruto returned to the woods. He realized he had stumbled upon the ultimate synergy. Asterisk the blood. The flow provided him with mid-range whips, sensory mist, and rapid healing. Asterisk the bone. The structure provided him with absolute defense and lethal close-quarters weaponry. He practiced a new technique he called the marrow forge. He found that by using his chakra to overproduce white blood cells and calcium, he could project bone spurs from any part of his body. But the real breakthrough came when he combined them. He would unsheathe a blade of bone from his forearm and then coat in a layer of rotating, high-pressure blood. It worked like a chainsaw. The bone provided the edge, and the blood provided the kinetic friction. He called this the sanguine saw. Team 7, the uneven balance. On the day of the team placements, Naruto walked into the classroom with a new posture. He wasn't slouching or yelling. He moved with a predatory grace. When he sat next to Sasuke, the Uchiha felt a chill. Sasuke's Sharingan hadn't awakened yet, but his instincts were screaming. Naruto smelled of iron and something ancient, something that smelled like a graveyard. "You've changed, loser," Sasuke muttered, not looking at him. "We all have to grow up eventually, Sasuke," Naruto replied. His voice was deeper, calmer. When Kakashi arrived and performed the bell test, the shift in power became undeniable. "You have to come at me with the intent to kill," Kakashi said, dangling the bells. Sasuke moved with his usual speed, and Sakura provided the distraction. But Naruto stayed back. He bit his lip, just enough to draw a bead of red, and then slammed his fist into the ground. Blood style, hidden veins. The blood traveled underground, surfacing beneath Kakashi's feet like crimson vines. Kakashi jumped into the air to avoid them, but that was exactly what Naruto wanted. While in midair, Naruto lunged. He didn't pull a kunai. Instead, 10 white spikes shot out from his fingertips, 10-finger drilling bullets. Kakashi's eyes widened. He recognized that technique. The Kagaya clan? No, that's impossible. They were wiped out in the mist. How does an Uzumaki have the Shikatsumiyaku? Kakashi performed a mid-air replacement, Kourimi, swapping himself with a log. The bone bullets shredded the wood into toothpicks. "Incredible," Kakashi said, landing on a nearby branch. "Blood manipulation and bone hardening. Naruto, you're a walking anatomical nightmare." The road to the waves, the first taste of death. The mission to protect Tazuna started normally, but the Demon Brothers' ambush changed the tone. When the two Chunin rose from the puddles to shred Kakashi, Naruto didn't freeze like he did in the original timeline. He stepped in front of Tazuna. As the chains of the Demon Brothers swung toward him, Naruto didn't dodge. He whispered, "Bone forest, ribcage shield." 6 massive, curved bones burst from Naruto's torso, interlocking in front of him like a white cage. The chain sparked against the bone, unable to leave even a scratch. Before the brothers could react, Naruto reached through the gaps in his own ribs. He grabbed one of the chains, and his blood began to crawl down the metal link like a red fuse. Blood burst. The blood on the chain exploded with the force of paper bomb. The shockwave sent the brothers reeling, and before they could recover, Sasuke moved in to finish the job. But Sasuke was staring at Naruto's back, at the white, skeletal armor that was slowly retracting back into Naruto's skin as if it had never been there. "What are you?" Sasuke asked, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and jealousy. Naruto looked back, his face pale but determined. "I'm a shinobi of the leaf, Sasuke, just like you." But as they continued toward the land of waves, Naruto could feel his bones itching. The more he used the power, the more his body wanted to transform. He began to wonder, if he kept turning his body into a weapon, would there be any Naruto left at the end? The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 3, The Iron Scent of the Mist. The air on the bridge was thick enough to swallow a manhole. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist, stood atop the unfinished stone, his massive Kubikurabocho resting on his shoulder. Opposite him, Team 7 stood in a defensive formation around the bridge builder, Tazuna. Kakashi, Zabuza's voice drifted through the fog, sounding like grinding stones. I see you've brought your brats again. Though, one of them smells different today. He smells like a slaughterhouse. Kakashi pulled his headband up, revealing the spinning tomo of the Sharingan. He's full of surprises, Zabuza, more than even I realized. Sasuke's knuckles were white as he gripped his kunai. Naruto, he hissed, his eyes darting through the gray veil. Stop standing there like a statue. If you got a plan, use it. This mist is getting thicker. Naruto stood perfectly still. He wasn't looking with his eyes. He was feeling the moisture in the air. It's not just mist, Sasuke, Naruto said, his voice eerily calm. It's chakra-infused water. He's using it to feel our movements. Suddenly, Zabuza vanished. Behind you, Sakura screamed. Zabuza appeared behind Tazuna, his giant blade swinging in a horizontal arc designed to bisect both the old man and whoever stood in his way. Sasuke moved, but he was too slow. Kakashi was intercepted by a water clone. Clang. The sound wasn't the wet thud of steel hitting flesh. It was the high-pitched ring of metal hitting something denser than diamond. Naruto had pivoted his left arm raised. Emerging from his forearm was a thick, serrated blade of bone, curved like a scimitar. It hadn't just grown out of his skin. It was pulsing with a dark, rhythmic red light. What? Zabuza grunted, his eyes widening behind his bandages. His massive sword was stuck, wedged into a notch in Naruto's bone blade. My turn, Naruto whispered. Blood style, crimson barbs. The blood that had sprayed from the small exit wound where Naruto's bone emerged suddenly hardened in midair. It turned into dozens of tiny, needle-sharp, crystalline shards. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto sent them flying at Zabuza's face. Zabuza forced a mid-air rotation, leaping back into the mist. Bone and blood? I've heard stories of the Kagaya bastards, but they didn't control the liquid, only the frame. Who are you, boy? I'm the one who's going to break that sword, Naruto replied. The dance of the macabre. From the shadows of the mist, Haku's ice mirrors began to form around Sasuke and Naruto. The temperature plummeted. Sasuke, get back to back with me, Naruto commanded. Don't tell me what to do, Sasuke snapped, though he moved into position. I can see his movements. My Sharingan is starting to track him. Track this, then, Haku's voice echoed from a dozen mirrors. A hail of sunbon needles flew toward them. Sasuke began to weave hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu. The flames bloomed, melting some needles, but Haku was too fast, moving between mirrors like a ghost. Fire isn't enough, Naruto said. He slammed his palms together. Bone release, macabre dome. A sickening crunch filled the air as Naruto's own ribs began to grow outward, extending from his chest and back, wrapping around both him and Sasuke like the petals of a morbid flower. The sunbon needles pinged harmlessly off the reinforced calcium walls. Inside here, I can't see him, Naruto muttered, his face sweating from the strain. Sasuke, I'm going to open a gap. When I do, use your fireball to create steam. I'll do the rest. Fine, Sasuke grumbled, impressed despite his pride. Just don't let those ribs poke me. Now. The bone dome flared open. Sasuke unleashed a massive blast of heat. As the fire hit the cold mist, a thick screen of steam erupted. Naruto reached into his own bone structure and snapped off a piece of his ulna, shaping it into a jagged spear in a split second. He coated the spear in a swirling vortex of high-pressure blood, the sanguine drill. I see you, Naruto growled. His blood manipulation allowed him to sense the iron in Haku's blood as the boy moved through the mirrors. Naruto lunged. He didn't aim for a mirror. He aimed for the space between them. The drill collided with Haku's shoulder as he transitioned. The demon's respect. Across the bridge, Zabuza watched his apprentice fall. His aura turned black with killing intent. You little freak. You've spilled his blood. Now, I'll drown this bridge in yours. Zabuza charged, ignoring Kakashi. He swung the Kubikurabocho with enough force to level a building. Naruto didn't flinch. He channeled every ounce of the fox's burning chakra into his skeletal system. Ultimate defense, shield of the ancestors. His entire skeleton hardened until it turned a dark, obsidian black. He caught Zabuza's blade with his bare hands. The force of the impact cracked the stone bridge beneath Naruto's feet, sending a spiderweb of fractures outward. "You're strong, old man," Naruto said, blood leaking from his nose as he pushed back against the massive sword. "But your blood is cold. Mine is boiling." The blood on Naruto's hands began to move, crawling up Zabuza's sword, seeking the gaps in the metal. "Kakashi, now!" Naruto yelled. Kakashi didn't waste the opening. Chidori chirped in his hand like 1,000 birds. He lunged through the gap Naruto had created, aiming for Zabuza's heart. But Haku, wounded and bleeding, moved. He threw himself in front of the lightning blade. The bridge went silent. Naruto watched as the boy he had just fought took the blow meant for his master. He felt the blood on the bridge, Haku's blood, and it felt sad. It lacked the malice of the fox. It was just the blood of a boy who loved someone. "Is this it?" Naruto whispered, his bone armor slowly receding into his skin, leaving him shivering. "Is this what it means to be a shinobi? Just tools to be broken?" Zabuza looked at Haku's limp body, then at Naruto. For the first time, the demon of the mist looked human. You have a terrifying gift, kid, but don't let it turn your heart to bone. Once that happens, you're already dead. That concludes part 3. Naruto has successfully defended the bridge, but the emotional weight of Haku's sacrifice is starting to sink in. The physical wounds heal quickly for Naruto, but the psychological shift, realizing he is a human weapon, starts to weigh on him. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 4, The Weight of the Blade. The mist finally began to lift, but the bridge felt heavier than ever. Gato, the billionaire tyrant, had arrived with his army of thugs, laughing at the fallen Zabuza and the useless Haku. Naruto stood over Haku's body. His knuckles were still stained red, and his breathing was ragged. He looked at Gato, a small, greedy man who saw shinobi as nothing more than disposable toothpicks. "You think this is funny?" Naruto's voice was a low, vibrating hum. "I think it's business, kid," Gato sneered, poking Haku's cold face with his cane. "The demon failed, so I don't have to pay him. Simple math." Something snapped inside Naruto. It wasn't the blind rage of the Nine Tails this time. It was a cold, surgical fury. He looked at Zabuza, who lay paralyzed, his arms broken and useless. "Zabuza," Naruto said, his voice echoing across the silent bridge. "You lived as a demon. Do you want to die like one, or like a man?" Zabuza looked up, his eyes glassy. "Give me a kunai, kid." "I have something better," Naruto replied. He walked over to the Kubikurabocho, the executioner's blade. The sword was massive, chipped, and heavy with the history of 1,000 kills. Naruto grabbed the hilt. Ordinarily, a 12-year-old couldn't lift it, but Naruto flooded his arm muscles with high-pressure blood, reinforcing his bone structure to act as a hydraulic brace. With a guttural grunt, he swung the massive slab of iron onto his shoulder. He walked to Zabuza and placed the hilt in the man's failing grip, while Naruto himself held the center of the blade to support the weight. Together, Naruto whispered. The two of them, the broken demon and the boy of blood and bone, charged the mob. It wasn't a fight, It was a harvest. Naruto didn't use jutsu. He used the sword as an extension of his own skeleton. When Gado's men struck him, their blades shattered against his calcium-reinforced skin. When the dust settled, Gado was gone, and the bridge was silent once more. The burial and the vow. The villagers of the Land of Waves helped bury Zabuza and Haku on a cliff overlooking the sea. The great Naruto Bridge stood behind them, a monument to their survival. Naruto stood before the grave, the Kubikurabocho buried partially in the dirt to serve as a headstone. "You're leaving it here?" Sasuke asked, standing a few paces back. His arm was in a sling, his eyes fixed on Naruto. "That's a 7 swordsman blade. It's worth a fortune. It's power." "Power isn't just about what you can kill, Sasuke," Naruto said. He reached out and touched the cold steel. As he did, he used a unique application of his power. He let a drop of his blood soak into the porous iron of the sword. "Zabuza told me not to let my heart turn a bone. He said if I become a tool, I'm already dead." Naruto pulled the sword from the ground. To everyone's shock, he didn't put it back. He began to wrap the blade in heavy bandages, just as Zabuza had. "I'm taking it with me," Naruto declared. "Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Every time I feel this weight on my back, I'll remember Haku. I'll remember that blood isn't just a weapon. It's what connects us. If I'm going to be a monster, I'll be the kind of monster that protects people from men like Gado." The return to Konoha. The walk back to the Hidden Leaf was quiet. Team 7 felt different. Kakashi watched his student from under his mask. Naruto was carrying a sword nearly as tall as he was, strapped to his back with leather winches. But it was his eyes that had changed. The frantic, "look at me," energy was gone. He moved with a quiet, somber authority. "Hey, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked as the gates of Konoha appeared in the distance. "Yes, Naruto." "The Hokage. He knew about my body, didn't he? He knew that I wasn't just normal." Kakashi sighed. "The third knows many things, Naruto, but you're blood and bone. That is a mutation even he couldn't have predicted. It's a gift from your ancestors and a curse from your jailer. How you balance them is up to you." Naruto adjusted the heavy strap of the executioner's blade. "I'm not going to hide it anymore. In the academy, I was afraid of being a freak. But on that bridge, being a freak saved my friends." As they entered the village, the citizens stared. They saw the demon child returning, but he wasn't pulling a prank. He was carrying the sword of a legendary assassin, his gaze fixed forward, his presence suffocatingly strong. Sakura walked up beside him, tentatively touching the hilt of the giant sword. Does it feel heavy, Naruto?" Naruto looked at her and gave a small, genuine smile, the first one in weeks. "It's supposed to be heavy, Sakura. It reminds me that I'm still human enough to feel the weight." Behind them, Sasuke watched Naruto's back, his teeth clenched. "He's evolving faster than I am," Sasuke realized. "Blood, bone, and now the sword. If I don't find my own path soon, I'll be nothing but his shadow." In the weeks following the Land of Waves, Konoha began to buzz with rumors of the boy with the bandage blade. Naruto didn't return to his old habits of painting the Hokage monument. Instead, he could be found at Training Ground 7 at 4 in the morning, the heavy iron of the Kubikurabocho whistling through the damp air. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 5, The Thirst of the Iron. The executioner's blade was unlike any other weapon. It was forged from a unique, or that could regenerate itself using the iron from the blood of those it cut. But in Naruto's hands, the sword began to act, strangely. Naruto stood in a clearing, the giant blade held in a two-handed grip. His muscles were corded with tension. Again, he grunted, swinging the slab of metal in a wide vertical arc. As the blade sliced through a training post, Naruto felt a strange sensation, a rhythmic tug against his palms. It was as if the sword had a heartbeat, because he was constantly circulating. His own chakra-infused blood into his hands to maintain the strength to carry the weapon. The sword was starting to drink from him. "You feel it too, don't you?" a voice called out. Naruto turned to see Sasuke leaning against a tree, his arms crossed. For once, there was no sneer on the Uchiha's face, only a quiet, intense curiosity. "It's like it's breathing," Naruto admitted, resting the tip of the blade on the ground. "Every time I flow my chakra, the metal gets warmer. I think it's trying to tell me something, but it's like a language I don't speak yet." Sasuke walked over, looking at the dark, porous steel. "My brother once told me that the greatest weapons aren't just tools. They're extensions of the user's spirit. That sword has killed thousands. It's heavy with their ghosts. But your blood, it's different. It's dense." The bond of the three. Later that afternoon, Sakura arrived with a picnic basket. She had watched Naruto and Sasuke training together from a distance. And for the first time, Team 7 felt like a real team rather than a forced arrangement. "You guys need to eat," she insisted, spreading out a cloth. "Naruto, you're looking paler than usual. Are you letting that sword drain you?" Naruto sat down, the massive blade leaning against a nearby rock. "I have to, Sakura. If I don't stay connected to it, I can't move it fast enough. It's like a trade. I give it a little of my life, and it gives me its weight." Sakura reached out, her fingers glowing with the faint green light of medical ninjutsu. She placed her hand on Naruto's forearm, checking his pulse. "Your heart is working twice as hard as a normal person's. Naruto, you're pushing your blood release to the limit just to carry that thing." She looked up at him, her eyes softening. "Don't lose yourself in the power. We need Naruto, not just a warrior." Naruto looked at his teammates. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the fox or his bloodline. "I won't," he promised. "I carry the sword, so I don't have to use the monster parts of me as much. It's my anchor. The resonance." As the sun began to set, the three of them sat in silence. Naruto placed his hand on the hilt of the Kubikurabocho. Suddenly, a pulse of crimson light rippled down the length of the blade, hidden beneath the bandages. The sword wasn't just mending itself anymore. Because of Naruto's bone release, the calcium in his system was starting to interact with the mineral impurities in the iron. Small, microscopic white veins were beginning to lace through the black metal, reinforcing the blade's structure from the inside. The sword was becoming more than a seven swordsman blade. It was becoming a sanguine bone hybrid. Naruto pulled back, his eyes wide. "What was that?" Sasuke asked, standing up. "It felt like a spark," Naruto whispered. "Like the sword is waiting for something. It's not ready to wake up yet, but it's hungry." The Chunin exam announcement. Their moment of peace was interrupted by a swirl of leaves. Kakashi appeared, holding 3 entry forms. "The Chunin exams are in 1 week, Kakashi said, his lone eye curving into a smile. "I've recommended all 3 of you. But be warned, the Hidden Sand and the Hidden Sound are sending their best. There are people coming who make Zabuza look like a genin." Naruto stood up, hoisting the heavy blade onto his back. The leather straps groaned under the weight. "Let them come," Naruto said. He looked at Sasuke and Sakura. "We're not the same kids who left for the Land of Waves. We've bled together." Sasuke nodded, a small, competitive smirk appearing. "Try not to let that oversized kitchen knife slow you down, Naruto." "Slow me down?" Naruto laughed, a sound that finally held some of his old childhood joy. "Sasuke, by the time the exams start, this sword and I are going to be one and the same." As they walked back to the village, Naruto felt the sword hum against his spine. It was a dormant power, what if waiting for the right moment of desperation to truly evolve. For now, it was just a heavy burden, but soon it would be the world's most terrifying weapon. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 6, The Green Beast and the Steel Nerve. The morning of the Chunin exams, Konoha felt electric. Genin from every hidden village crowded the streets, but none drew stares quite like Team 7. Naruto walked in the center, the massive, bandaged Kubikurabocho towering over his head. "Everyone is staring," Sakura whispered, clutching her kunai pouch. "Let them stare," Sasuke said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "It's better they're intimidated now than surprised later." As they climbed the stairs toward room 301, a blur of green intercepted them. In an instant, a boy with thick eyebrows and a bowl cut was standing in front of them, his hand extended. "You there?" "The one with the black hair and the brooding eyes," Rock Lee shouted, pointing at Sasuke. "I am Rock Lee. I wish to challenge you right here, right now." "HN, you're out of your league, bowl cut," Sasuke sneered, stepping forward. But Naruto stepped between them. He didn't move fast. He moved heavily. With every step, the floorboards groaned under the weight of his blood-dense muscles. He rested the flat of his bandaged blade on his shoulder. "He didn't ask you, Naruto," Sasuke hissed. "He's not looking at your eyes, Sasuke," Naruto said calmly. "He's looking at my feet. He knows." Rock Lee's expression shifted from excitement to intense focus. "The boy with the blade? Your stance. It is like a mountain. You do not use chakra to stand. You use your very cells. I can feel the heat radiating from your skin." "It's called the sanguine pulse," Naruto replied. "My heart beats harder than yours, Lee. You want to test the Uchiha? You have to get past the shield first." Lee lunged. He was a blur of pure taijutsu. He aimed a leaf whirlwind kick at Naruto's head. Naruto didn't dodge. He simply shifted his weight and raised his forearm. Clack. The sound was like a hammer hitting a stone pillar. Lee's shin collided with Naruto's arm, but Naruto's skin didn't give. Beneath the orange sleeve, a layer of subcutaneous bone plate had formed instantly. Lee flipped backward, landing gracefully. Sublime. Such hardness. I have never felt a body so reinforced. Before the fight could escalate, a giant tortoise appeared, followed by the handsome devil himself, my guy. The interaction was a whirlwind of youthful tears and poses, but as Team Guy turned to leave, Neji Hyuga lingered. His Byakugan was active, his veins bulging around his eyes. "Ew," Neji said, pointing at Naruto. "Your circulatory system is a mess of dark, thick chakra. And your bones, they aren't shaped like a human's anymore. You are a freak of nature, Uzumaki. But remember, fate cannot be changed by hardening your skin." Naruto gripped the hilt of the executioner's blade. "Fate is just a bone, Neji. If it's in the way, I'll just break it and reset it." The first phase, the written exam. The atmosphere inside the classroom was suffocating. Ibiki Marino, the Scarface proctor, stood at the front, projecting enough killing intent to make the air feel like lead. "The rules are simple," Ibiki growled. "But if you're caught cheating 5 times, you fail. If you fail the 10th question, you stay a genin forever." Naruto sat at his desk, the Kubikurabocho leaning against the chair next to him. He looked at the test. The math was impossible. The codes were unbreakable for a boy who had spent his life training in the woods. "I can't use my brain for this," Naruto thought. "I have to use my blood." He closed his eyes and entered a state of deep circulation. He slowed his heart rate until it was barely a thrum. He let a microscopic amount of blood leak from his pores, turning it into a fine, invisible mist that coated the room, the sanguine web. Through the mist, he could feel the vibrations of every pen in the room. He felt the frantic, precise movements of the plant, ninja who knew the answers. Up, down, circle line. Naruto's hand moved in perfect sync with a genius 3 rows away. He wasn't seeing the answers. He was feeling the kinetic energy of the truth. Beside him, Sasuke was using his Sharingan to mimic movements, and Sakura was answering through sheer intellect. But Naruto's method was primal. He was tasting the room's collective knowledge. Suddenly, a kunai slammed into the desk of the student behind him. "You, caught 5 times. Get out," Ibiki roared. Naruto didn't flinch. His blood web told him exactly where the proctors were looking. He retracted the mist back into his skin, the iron returning to his body. Then came the 10th question, the ultimatum. "If you stay and get it wrong, you can never take the exam again," Ibiki said, his voice a psychological hammer. "If you leave now, you could try again next year. Who stays?" The room descended into a panic. Hand after hand went up as Genin crumbled under the pressure. Naruto looked at the executioner's blade beside him. He remembered Haku's blood on the bridge. He remembered Zabuza's final breath. He didn't raise his hand. Instead, he slammed his fist on a desk. A bone spike shot an inch out of his knuckle, piercing the wood. "Don't underestimate us," Naruto yelled, his voice shattering the silence. "I don't care if I stay at Genin forever. I'll still become the Hokage, even if I have to do it without a rank. I don't give up, and I don't run from a fight." His outburst was the catalyst. The remaining students found their resolve. Ibiki stared at Naruto for a long moment. Then a rare, terrifying smirk crossed his face. "You pass," Ibiki said. "The 10th question was a test of will. And you, boy with the sword, you have a spine made of more than just calcium." As the window shattered and Anko Mitarashi made her grand entrance to announce the second phase, Naruto felt a surge of adrenaline. The psychological games were over. Now, they were going into the forest. And in the forest, things would finally get bloody. The gates of the forest of death groaned open, and Team 7 vanished into the emerald gloom. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The air here was thick with the scent of damp earth, rotting vegetation, and the metallic tang of hidden predators. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 7, The Predator's Pulse. "Keep your senses sharp," Sasuke whispered, his hand hovering over his kunai pouch. "This place is a meat grinder." "I've got it covered," Naruto replied. He wasn't looking at the trees. He had unbuttoned the cuffs of his sleeves. As they ran, he allowed his sanguine pulse to expand. He wasn't just breathing the air. He was feeling the humidity. In this forest, every living thing had a heartbeat, and to Naruto, those heartbeats were like drums in a silent room. "Down!" Naruto suddenly barked. He swung the Kubikurabocho in a massive horizontal arc. A giant, translucent forest leech, the size of a small carriage, had been dropping from the canopy, its needle teeth ready to drain them. The heavy blades sliced through the creature's rubbery hide, but the leech's blood was acidic, hissing as it touched the steel. "Disgusting," Sakura cried, jumping back. "There are hundreds of them." "Don't waste your kunai," Naruto commanded. He slammed the hilt of his sword into the ground. Blood style, iron parasite. The blood on a blade from the dead, leech didn't drip off. Naruto's chakra seized control of it. He manipulated the creature's own acidic gore, hardening it into jagged red needles that he sent flying into the canopy. High above, several more leeches were pinned to the trees, shriveling as Naruto's chakra disrupted their internal chemistry. Sasuke watched, his eyes narrowing. He didn't even look up. He's sensing the iron in their bodies. The shadow in the trees. After the leech encounter, the forest went eerily silent. Even the insects stopped chirping. "Something's wrong," Sakura whispered, her medical Nin training making her sensitive to the sudden drop in the life energy of the area. The forest feels dead. It's not dead, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He felt it, a heartbeat that didn't sound like a human's. It was slow, cold, and heavy like a serpent's. It's being suppressed. A sudden gust of wind erupted, carrying the stench of ozone and old skin. Before they could react, a massive snake, 50 feet long, burst from the undergrowth. Standing atop its head was the grass ninja they had seen at the gate. The stranger didn't say a word. He simply released his killing intent. It hit like a physical shockwave. Sakura's vision blurred, and she fell to her knees, vomiting from the sheer psychological pressure. Sasuke froze, his Sharingan spinning wildly, but his muscles refused to move. He saw visions of his own death, repeated 1,000 times in a second. Naruto, however, stood his ground. He felt the pressure, but his blood was boiling, literally. By vibrating the fluid in his veins at a high frequency, he created a heat shield that burned through the mental paralysis. "You have a very loud soul, Grass Ninja," Naruto said, drawing his blade. The bandages on the sword began to unravel as the iron within sensed a worthy meal. "And you," the stranger hissed, his tongue flicking out, "have a very delicious lineage. An Uzumaki with the bones of a Kagaya and the heart of a fox. You are a treasure chest of forbidden biology." The clash of the monsters. The Grass Ninja, Orochimaru, lunged. He didn't use a weapon. His neck simply extended like a whip, his head flying toward Naruto with fangs bared. Naruto didn't parry. He used bone release, spinal whip. With a sickening crack, a series of interlocking vertebrae erupted from Naruto's own back, snapping outward to intercept Orochimaru's neck. The two limbs collided in midair, bone clashing against scales. "Sasuke, move!" Naruto roared. The shout broke Sasuke's trance. Seeing Naruto fighting this monster gave him the spark he needed. Fire style, dragon flame jutsu. Sasuke unleashed a searing torrent of fire. Orochimaru laughed, his body shedding its skin like a cicada to escape the flames. He reappeared behind Naruto, his hand transformed into a nest of vipers. "Let's see how your blood tastes." The snakes bit deep into Naruto's shoulders, but Orochimaru's smile vanished. The snakes didn't draw blood. They began to shrivel and turn to stone. "You forgot," Naruto whispered, his eyes glowing a predatory red. "I control the pressure." Inside Naruto's body, he had hardened his blood into microcrystalline shards. The moment the snakes bit him, he forced his blood into their fangs, shredding their insides from the mouth up. Naruto grabbed the executioner's blade with both hands. Sanguine style, executioner's waltz. He spun in a whirlwind of steel. The blade, now partially fused with Naruto's own bone growth for a better grip, carved a deep furrow across Orochimaru's chest. The sword groaned with a hollow, hungry sound as it drank the Sannin's blood, mending a chip in its edge instantly. "Enough games," Orochimaru hissed, his face peeling away to reveal his true, pale features. He realized that this boy wasn't just a Jinchuriki. He was a natural counter to Orochimaru's own body modification research. "You are too valuable to kill, but you need to be marked." Orochimaru's neck extended one last time, aiming for the seal on Naruto's stomach. He slammed the five-pronged seal onto Naruto, disrupting the flow of the fox's chakra. Naruto gasped, his blood sense vanishing as his chakra became a chaotic mess. He collapsed, the heavy sword falling beside him with a dull thud. "Naruto!" Sakura screamed, finally finding her voice. Orochimaru turned his gaze to Sasuke, who was trembling. "Now for the main course." This concludes the first encounter with Orochimaru. Naruto is down, and the fox's chakra is locked away, leaving Sasuke and Sakura alone to defend their shield. The forest floor was damp and smelled of copper. Naruto lay unconscious, his breathing shallow. The five-pronged seal Orochimaru had burned in his gut was like a dam, causing his chakra to back up and bloat his system. For the first time, the boiling in his blood had gone cold. Beside him, Sasuke was also incapacitated, his body writhing from the agonizing heat of the newly branded curse mark. Sakura Haruno had never felt more alone. She sat between the two boys she cared for most, clutching a kunai with trembling hands. She looked at Naruto. His skin, usually radiating a dull heat from his bloodline, was now pale, almost as white as the bone spikes he had used to protect them. "I'm the only one left," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm the only one who can protect them." She spent the night setting traps, tri-wires, falling logs, and hidden pits. She was exhausted, but she didn't sleep. Every time a leaf rustled, she flinched. At dawn, they arrived. 3 genin from the hidden sound: Dosu, Zaku, and Kin. "Move, little girl," Dosu rasped, his metallic arm guard humming with sonic energy. "We're here for the Uchiha, but the boy with the giant sword. Orochimaru wants him brought back alive if possible. Though, I don't mind if he's missing a few limbs." Sakura stood her ground. "You aren't touching them." The battle was brutal. Sakura's traps were triggered and bypassed. She was beaten, her hair grabbed by Kin. In a moment of pure desperation and character growth, Sakura realized she had always been the one watched from behind. She took her kunai and sliced through her own hair to free herself, biting Kin's arm with a feral intensity. The arrival of the beast. Just as Dosu prepared to finish Sakura with a sonic blast, a green blur intercepted him. Rock Lee arrived, his speed making the Sound Ninja look like they were standing still. "I promised I would protect you until I died, Sakura," Lee shouted, his eyes fierce. Lee fought with the intensity of a demon, using the primary lotus, but the Sound Ninja's sonic attacks bypassed his physical speed. Lee fell, his ears bleeding from the internal pressure of the sound waves. The Sound Ninja laughed, stepping over Lee's body. They turned toward the hollow of the tree where Naruto and Sasuke lay. The internal adaptation. Inside Naruto's mind, he was drowning in a sea of black ink. The five-pronged seal was a cage within a cage. "Move," he told himself. "My team, I can hear them screaming." Because Naruto had spent years training his blood release to regulate his internal systems, his body began to do something no ordinary ninjas could. His red blood cells, infused with the natural vitality of the Uzumaki, began to attack the foreign chakra of the seal. It wasn't a mental battle. It was a biological one. His bone marrow began to overproduce, creating a surge of pressure that forced his chakra through the dam. Crack. Outside, Naruto's body suddenly arched. A single, needle-thin bone spur erupted from his shoulder, vibrating at a frequency that canceled out the lingering sonic hum in the air. The cold awakening. Sasuke woke first, but he was changed. The curse mark had spread across his face in black, flame-like patterns. His aura was cold and murderous. He broke Zaku's arms with a sickening lack of emotion. "Sasuke, stop." Sakura cried, terrified by the darkness in his eyes. But it was Naruto who truly ended the fight. He stood up slowly, picking up the Kubikurabocho. He didn't have the fox's orange glow. He didn't have the manic energy. He was eerily silent. His eyes weren't blue or red. They were slate gray, the color of weathered bone. "You've hurt my friends," Naruto said. He didn't run. He performed a pulse step. In a flash of speed that left a literal spray of mist behind him, he appeared in front of Dosu. He didn't swing the sword. He simply placed his hand on Dosu's chest. Blood style, hemorrhage. Naruto didn't draw Dosu's blood out. Instead, he used his own chakra to vibrate the iron in Dosu's own veins. The sound ninja gasped, his heart skipping beats, his vision turning red as his capillaries began to burst. It wasn't a heroic move, it was a terrifying display of biological dominance. "Leave," Naruto whispered, his voice cold enough to frost the air, "before I decide to turn your skeletons into my next weapon." The Sound Ninja, seeing the terrifying duo of a curse-marked Uchiha and a bone-wielding Jinchuriki, grabbed their scrolls and fled into the forest. The recovery. The darkness receded from Sasuke's skin, and the color returned to Naruto's face. The five-pronged seal was still there, but Naruto's body had mapped a way around it. He was weaker, but he was more precise. Sakura ran to them, hugging them both. "You're back. You're both back." Naruto looked at his hands, then at the executioner's blade. The sword seemed to be glowing with a faint, pulse-like light. It had tasted the sound chakra, and the bone veins in the metal were starting to harden even further. "We have to finish the exam," Naruto said, looking at Sasuke. "No more distractions." Sasuke looked at Naruto, his grip tightening on his arm where the mark burned. "Yeah, let's get to the tower." The tower stood at the center of the forest like a tombstone. When Team 7 arrived, they were battered and exhausted, but they carried an aura that made the other genin pull back. Naruto's Kubikurobocho was no longer just a sword. It was wrapped in a way that made it look like a giant, mummified limb, the bone veins occasionally pulsing beneath the bandages. The third Hokage looked down from the balcony, his eyes lingering on Naruto. He carries the weight of a 7 swordsman, but his chakra, it feels like a dormant volcano. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 9, The Cold Edge of the Bone. The preliminaries were announced. One-on-one combat to thin the herd. The screen flickered, the names spinning until they landed. Naruto Uzumaki versus Kiba Inuzuka. Finally, Kiba barked, jumping over the railing with Akamaru on his head. "I've been waiting to show you how a real alpha fights. Naruto, no more hiding behind that oversized kitchen knife." Naruto stepped into the arena. He didn't jump, he walked. Every footfall sounded like a hammer. He unstrapped the executioner's blade and drove it into the floorboards. Thump! The ground cracked under the weight. "I won't use the sword for this, Kiba," Naruto said quietly. "It's too hungry today. I'll use my own hands." "Don't underestimate me," Kiba roared. Man-beast clone. Kiba and Akamaru transformed into a twin-headed whirlwind. Fong over Fong. 2 massive, rotating drills of fur and claws tore across the arena floor, shredding the wood into splinters. The internal lockdown. Naruto closed his eyes. Because of the 5-pronged seal, he couldn't tap into the fox's bottomless chakra. He had to rely on efficiency. Heart rate, 40 beats per minute. Blood pressure, maximized in the forearms. Calcium density, level 4. As the first Fong reached him, Naruto didn't dodge. He stood in a low horse stance. Bone release, shield of the white forest. Suddenly, dozens of small, needle-thin bone spurs erupted from Naruto's chest and arms, slanted at a 45-degree angle. When Kiba's spinning form hit Naruto, the bone spurs didn't just block him, they acted like a grater. The sound of claws on bone was like metal on a grindstone. Kiba was deflected, spinning wildly out of control and slamming into the wall. What kind of skin do you have?" Kiba gasped, his sleeves shredded and his arms covered in shallow grazes. "It's not skin," Naruto replied. He held up his hand. Slowly, the skin on his palm split, and a blade made of blackened, dense bone slid out. Its structure. The Sanguine Trap. Kiba, desperate to regain his momentum, threw a smoke bomb. You can't hit what you can't see. Akamaru, pill-enhanced Fong. The arena filled with thick, acrid smoke. But Naruto just stood still. He didn't need eyes. He released a microscopic mist of his own blood through his pores, the sanguine map. In the smoke, every drop of Naruto's blood acted as a sensor. He felt the heat of Kiba's body and the rapid heartbeat of Akamaru. Behind me, Naruto whispered. He didn't turn. He forced a burst of high-pressure blood into his heel. Pull step, reverse. Naruto vanished and reappeared behind Kiba in the smoke. He didn't strike with the bone blade. Instead, he grabbed Kiba's wrist. Blood style, iron lockdown. Naruto forced his own chakra into Kiba's arm through the skin. It didn't hurt, but Kiba's arm suddenly became heavy, impossibly heavy. The iron in Kiba's blood was being clamped by Naruto's magnetic-like chakra. Kiba's arm dropped to the floor, dragging him down with it. I can't move my arm. Kiba panicked. The match is over, Kiba, Naruto said, the smoke clearing. Naruto's bone blade was resting gently against Kiba's throat. If I increase the pressure, your heart will stop trying to pump against the weight. Yield. Kiba looked into Naruto's eyes. They weren't the eyes of the boy who failed his clones. They were the eyes of a specialist, someone who understood the grim reality of the human body. I forfeit, Kiba muttered. The hidden observation. In the balcony, the proctors were silent. Kakashi looked at the third Hokage. He didn't use a single drop of the Nine Tails chakra, Kakashi whispered. He fought that entirely with his own mutated biology. He's becoming a master of internal alchemy. It is more than that, the third replied, his pipe unlit. He is learning to control the very essence of life and death. But look at his sword. The Kubikurobocho, still stuck in the floor, was vibrating. The bone veins on the blade were turning a deep, angry crimson. It had been watching the fight, and it was getting restless. As Naruto walked back to the balcony, he passed Neji Hyuga. Neji didn't say a word, but his Byakugan was active, staring at Naruto's skeletal structure with a look of genuine disbelief. Your fate is a dark one, Uzumaki, Neji said as Naruto passed. Maybe, Naruto replied, not stopping, but at least I'm the one holding the pen. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 10, The Graveyard of Whirlpools. Jiraiya stood on the surface of a hot spring, grinning down at Naruto. All right, kid, you've got the spirit, but your chakra is a mess. We need to clear those pipes. Sign this contract with the Toads, mold every ounce of energy you have, and push. Naruto bit his thumb, smeared a line of crimson across his palm, and slammed it into the ground, summoning Jutsu. But the chakra didn't flow outward into a puff of smoke. Instead, the ground beneath Naruto turned into a literal whirlpool of dark, viscous red. The space around him folded. Jiraiya's shout of "wait, that's not," was cut off as Naruto was sucked into a void that smelled of iron and salt. The land of red mist. When Naruto's vision cleared, he wasn't in the hidden leaf. He was standing on a jagged coastline under a sky the color of a fading bruise. Before him lay the ruins of Uzushiobikure, the land of whirlpools. The buildings were shattered skeletons of stone, but they weren't gray. They were stained a permanent, rust red. As Naruto walked through the ruins, the Kubikurobocho on his back began to vibrate, so violently the bandages shredded away. You shouldn't be here, a voice rumbled like boulders grinding together. Out of the red mist emerged a beast that defied logic. It was a tiger, but its fur was made of flowing, liquid crimson, and its stripes were white, not fur, but exposed bone plates that shifted as it moved. I am Ketsuga, the first stripe of the sanguine pride. The tiger growled, its eyes glowing like embers. You have the scent of the broken seal, yet you carry the marrow of the kings. Why has the blood called you home, boy? The ancestral lessons. For 3 weeks, Naruto didn't train. He survived. Kitsuga didn't teach him hand signs. He taught him the 3 pillars of the primal body. Asterisk hemostatics. Control Ketsuga showed Naruto how to freeze his blood inside his veins to stop internal bleeding or to create weapons of solid iron density without losing a single drop of fluid. Asterisk marrow compression. Power Naruto learned that his bones were hollow for a reason. By compressing his chakra into his marrow, he could trigger explosive growth, firing bone shards like high-velocity railgun slugs. Asterisk the heart of the whirlpool. Flow, he learned that the Uzumaki whirlpool wasn't just a symbol. By making his blood rotate at high speeds within his body, he could create a centrifugal force that acted as a kinetic shield, throwing off any physical or chakra-based attack. In the center of the ruins, Naruto found an ancient tablet. It described how the Uzumaki once used the blood tiger style to hunt the very monsters people now feared. Naruto realized his mutation wasn't a fluke. It was a dormant apex predator gene that the Nine-Tails chakra had accidentally jump-started. The evolution of the blade. During his final night in the ruins, Naruto sat before Ketsuga. He placed the Kubikurabocho between them. The sword is hungry, Ketsuga noted, his tail, a whip of serrated bone, lashing the ground. It is a relic of the mist, but it has no soul. It is just a stomach. Naruto reached out and gripped the blade. Following Ketsuga's instruction, he didn't just let the sword drink his blood. He forced his bone marrow to extend into the metal itself. The sword screamed. The black iron of the executioner's blade began to crack and reshape. The bone veins that had been growing on it finally fused, forming a permanent skeletal spine along the back of the blade. The sword was no longer just a slab of iron. It was now a biological symbiote. It is now the Ketsukuba, the blood fong, Ketsuga declared. It will not mend with the blood of others anymore. It will only mend with yours. And in exchange, it will never break, and it will strike with the weight of your entire lineage. The return to the finals. A swirl of red mist erupted in the center of the Chunin exam arena, just as Gunma was about to declare Naruto a no-show. Naruto stepped out of the mist. He looked older, leaner. His skin had a faint, metallic sheen, and his eyes had a predatory sharpness that made the Chunin in the front row flinch. He didn't carry the sword on his back anymore. The hilt was wrapped in a chain of bone that was fused directly to his right forearm. Niji Hyuga stepped forward, his Byakugan flaring. You're late. Failure. I suppose fate gave you one last chance to run, and you were too stupid to take it. Naruto didn't yell. He didn't even smile. He just felt the rhythmic, high-speed rotation of the blood in his heart. Niji, Naruto said, his voice like the grinding of the tide. I've seen where the bones of geniuses go when they die. They look exactly like mine. Let's see if your fate can handle the pressure. The stadium fell into a haunting silence as Naruto stepped onto the dirt. The air around him seemed to shimmer with a faint, reddish haze, the sanguine heat of a body whose blood was moving at 3 times the normal velocity. The Chronicles of the Crimson Fox, Part 11, The Shattered Vision. Niji Hyuga dropped into the signature stance of the gentle fist, his fingers poised like needles. You feel different, Naruto, but no matter how much you change your appearance, Your chakra points remain the same. I will close them all. You can try, Naruto said. He didn't draw his sword yet. He stood with his arms hanging loosely, his heartbeat a steady, heavy thrum that those in the front row could actually hear. Begin, Gama shouted, leaping back. Niji blurred into motion. 2 palms. For palms. Niji's strikes were precise, aimed at the vital node. The moment Niji's fingers touched Naruto's skin, the high-speed rotation of Naruto's blood, the heart of the whirlpool, deflected the chakra needle. The strike didn't sink in, it slid off. 8 palms. 16 palms. Niji grew desperate, his strikes becoming a frenzy of motion. 32. 64 palms. Niji finished the final strike with a thunderous palm to Naruto's solar plexus. A cloud of dust erupted. Niji exhaled, his veins bulging. It is over. Your chakra flow is. Is what, Niji? The dust cleared. Naruto hadn't moved an inch. His shirt was shredded where the strikes had landed, revealing skin that looked like polished copper. My blood is moving too fast for your gentle touch to catch. You're trying to stop a river by throwing pebbles at it. The primal counter. Naruto reached out and grabbed Niji's wrist. His grip was like a vise of iron. Blood-style pressure spike. Naruto didn't hit Niji. He simply sent a pulse of his own rotating chakra into Niji's arm. Niji cried out as the blood in his own limb began to circulate in reverse, the sheer pressure causing his skin to turn a bruised purple instantly. Niji forced a Kaiten heavenly rotation, the blue dome of chakra throwing Naruto back. I don't know what trick you've learned, but no one escapes the 64 palms. I'm done playing by your rules, Naruto said. He reached back and grasped the hilt of Kitsukuba. With a metallic shing, the sword came free. The bone chain fused to Naruto's arm rattled. Naruto slammed the tip of the blade into the ground. Marrow release, earth-breaking ribs. Naruto channeled his chakra into the spine of the sword and through the floor. Suddenly, the arena floor didn't just crack. It erupted. Massive, jagged ivory spikes, curved like the ribs of a great blood tiger, burst from the ground beneath Niji. Niji spun into his rotation again, but the bone spikes weren't made of pure chakra. They were physical, dense calcium. The rotation sparked against the bone, grinding like a saw. The shield of the Hyuga is absolute, Niji roared. Nothing is absolute, Naruto countered. He leaped into the air, the Kitsukuba glowing a deep, malevolent red. Sanguine style, falling fawn. As he descended, Naruto forced his blood to concentrate in his arms, doubling their size for a split second. The sword hit the top of Niji's rotation dome. The impact sounded like a mountain collapsing. The chakra dome shattered like glass. The truth of the cage. Niji lay in the crater, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His shoulder was dislocated, and his Byakugan was flickering. Naruto stood over him, the shadow of the bone sword falling across the genius. Why? Niji hissed, blood leaking from his lip. Why do you struggle against fate? You were born a failure, a monster. I went to the ruins of my people, Niji, Naruto said, his voice low so only the two of them could hear. I saw the bones of thousands of Uzumakis who were destined to be the strongest. They died anyway. Fate didn't kill them. People did. And people can be stopped. Naruto reached up and untied his forehead protector. He showed Niji the 5-pronged seal on his stomach, then pointed to the bone chain fused to his arm. You think you're in a cage because of that mark on your head? I'm fused to a demon and a dead man's sword. My own blood tries to kill me every day if I don't control it. Naruto narrowed his eyes. A cage only works if you agree to stay inside the bars. I decided to eat the bars. Gamal looked at Niji, then at Naruto. Niji closed his eyes, his will finally broken by the sheer, overwhelming reality of Naruto's existence. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. The storm gathers. The crowd was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into a mixture of cheers and terrified whispers. But high in the Kage's booth, the Kazekage, Orochimaru in disguise, leaned forward, his yellow eyes fixed on the Kitsukuba. The boy didn't just survive my seal, Orochimaru thought, a long tongue licking his lips. He used it as a whetstone. He has become the perfect specimen. In the waiting area, Gaara of the desert stood up. The sand in his gourd was screaming. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, the monster inside Gaara felt a genuine shiver of fear. His blood, Gaara whispered. It's not silent. It's roaring. The victory over Niji shifted the atmosphere of the stadium from skepticism to a heavy, apprehensive awe. But the schedule marched on. The next highly anticipated match was Sasuke Uchiha versus Gaara. As the minutes ticked past the start time, the crowd began to murmur. High in the stands, Naruto stood with Sakura, his hand resting on the hilt of the Kitsukuba. He could feel the agitation in the air. The blood sense he'd honed in the whirlpool ruins was picking up hundreds of hidden, cold heartbeats scattered throughout the audience. He's late, Sakura fretted. If he doesn't show up, they'll disqualify him. He's coming, Naruto said, his voice a low hum. I can feel the air getting sharp. The arrival of the Avenger. Just as Gunma was raising his hand to call the match, a swirl of leaves ignited in the center of the arena. When the dust settled, Sasuke Uchiha stood back to back with Kakashi. Sasuke had changed. He wore a high-collared black tunic, and his eyes were cold, reflecting a newfound maturity. But it wasn't just his clothes, it was his presence. A faint smell of ozone followed him, and the ground around his feet seemed to crackle with static. Sorry we're late, Kakashi chirped, though his eyes were fixed on the Kazekage in the booth. Sasuke turned to face Gaara. He didn't look at the sand, he looked through it. Let's get this over with, Sasuke muttered. The Battle of the Prodigies. Begin. Gaara didn't wait. The sand erupted from his gourd, forming a massive, grasping claw. Sasuke didn't move until the sand was inches from his face. In a blur of speed that rivaled Lee's, Sasuke vanished. Crack. Sasuke appeared behind Gaara, his leg encased in a flickering shroud of lightning. He delivered a roundhouse kick that shattered Gaara's shield of sand. Gaara's eyes widened. More! Give me more of your blood. He retreated into his sphere of sand, a defensive dome that bristled with jagged spikes. Sasuke retreated to the arena wall. He began to run, not away, but up. He climbed the vertical stone until he was high above the arena floor. He began to weave hand signs at a speed the naked eye couldn't track. Bird, dragon, hare. He's doing it, Naruto whispered from the balcony. The technique that mirrors the sky. Sasuke's left hand erupted in a scream of 1,000 birds, but it was different than Kakashi's. The lightning wasn't just blue, it was laced with black streaks, the influence of the curse mark being channeled and refined by Sasuke's sheer willpower. Chidori, dark current. Sasuke plummeted. He wasn't just a falling body. He was a spear of pure electrical kinetic energy. He slammed into Gaara's sand sphere. The lightning didn't just pierce it, it vitrified it. The sand turned to molten glass instantly, shattering under the pressure. A blood-curdling scream echoed from inside the sphere. Sasuke pulled his hand back, blood dripping from his fingers, Gaara's blood. The invasion begins. That drop of blood was the signal. High above, Kabuto initiated the Jinjutsu. White feathers began to drift from the sky, putting the civilian audience into a deep sleep. Now, a voice roared from the Kage's booth. A massive explosion rocked the Hokage's seating area. Purple flames erupted, forming a barrier, the Four Violet Flames formation. Orochimaru had revealed himself, holding the third Hokage hostage. Sakura, wake up! Naruto barked, placing a hand on her shoulder and pulsing his chakra through her system to break the illusion. Down in the arena, Gaara was being carried away by Temari and Kankuro. He was transforming, his arm becoming a grotesque limb of sand and madness. Sasuke, don't let them get to the forest. Naruto yelled, leaping from the balcony. As he landed, he slammed Ketsukuba into the ground. Marrow style, ivory palisade. Massive, 12-foot-high bone walls erupted around the arena exits, funneling the invading sound and sand ninja into a bottleneck. I'm going after Gaara. Sasuke shouted, his Sharingan glowing with a manic intensity. Keep the village safe, Naruto. Go, Naruto replied. He turned to face a squad of sound jonin who were descending on the arena floor. Naruto gripped his sword. The bone chain fused to his arm rattled with anticipation. Kitsuga taught me that tigers don't hunt in packs, Naruto whispered, his blood beginning to rotate at the high-speed whirlpool frequency. They just clear the forest. As Sasuke vanished into the trees in a streak of lightning, Naruto unleashed the sanguine heat. The sound ninja lunged, but they found themselves fighting a boy whose bones were harder than their swords and whose blood could turn into a lethal mist with a single breath.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.